This episode is brought to you by Island. Today's healthcare staff needs safe, convenient, and dependable access to patient data across various applications. Island, the enterprise browser, simplifies and secures healthcare data access. It's a new take on the most common application we use every day, the web browser, tailored for the unique demands of healthcare. Clinicians can safely log in from any device to interact with HealthSystem applications and PHI. Built-in last-mile controls keep data where it belongs, so access is simple, data is safe, and patient care is smooth. Visit thisweekhealth.com/island to see Island for yourself.
Today on UnHack the News.
Is there some way that we can synergize our efforts together as a community to have these labs where we're testing out these newer technologies or these other vendors to make sure that we can build it out?
Hi, I'm Drex, a recovering healthcare CIO and longtime cyber advisor and strategist for some of the world's most innovative cybersecurity companies. Now I'm president of This Week Health's 229 Cyber and Risk community. And this is UnHack the News, a mostly plain English, mostly non-technical show covering the latest and most important security news stories. And now, this episode of UnHack the News. Hey everyone, I'm Drex, and this is UnHack the News. I think I was thinking UnHack the podcast. This is UnHack the News, and I'm Drex DeFord, and over there is Christian from Island. How you doing today?
Very good, sir. How are you?
I'm good. There's a lot of cool stuff that's happening right now. I know there were a couple of things in particular that you had sent to me that you wanted to talk about on the show today. I don't know which one you want to start with. We've got two different stories here that I think are definitely worth diving into. One of them's kind of the general healthcare cybersecurity problem. The other one is the article by Bill Russell, or the set of articles by Bill Russell around VMware and price shock and the wake-up call for healthcare IT folks. Where do you want to start?
Surprise me.
Well, let's start with the article from Errol Weiss, the Chief Security Officer at Health ISAC. And there was this sort of interesting thing that happened a couple of months ago. There was sort of like a general, non-specific warning to everyone about something bad's going to happen at hospitals across the country, like some kind of terrorist attack or something. That didn't wind up happening. But what kind of came from that is, I think, a lot of folks having that reaction of like, okay, well, there's this notification, so it's a great opportunity for us to look at our processes and think about what we do and how resilience works and what happens if systems go offline or if people can't come to work or whatever the situation may be. You're the one who sent me the article. What did you find in there that you thought was especially intriguing around the content or around the point that Errol Weiss is making in the article?
What I liked about it is it gave organizations that kind of overall thought process that maybe we don't have all these things in line yet. And anytime that anything that pops up, whether it's industry-based or very specific to healthcare, that makes them take a step back and make sure that they've got all their bases covered. I find that very interesting because oftentimes what you'll see is that, there are some gaps. And I think especially coming out of the whole COVID situation with how we had to react very quickly and probably do things that were not in the best interest of security and access that you probably just forget about. You did something because you had to send all these people home or you had to stand up these remote care facilities, or how many things have you forgotten about on that list that you've kind of now moved on getting back into operations?
We talk about this all the time, or I talk about this all the time with CISOs. There's the best ones keep some kind of like a project management list or something. Oh, we created this exception because we needed to hurry up and get this done or approve it or get it fielded or turn on this access or whatever the case may be. And then they made the exception, but they never really went back and finished the work. They intend to. They have great intention to do that. It's just that it gets overcome by events. And then you wind up with a ton of those on the list. Hopefully they're on a list. The reality is for a lot of folks, they're not on any list and they don't find them until that landmine blows up in their face. And so it is opportunities like this just to be able to go back and ask some of those questions. It's important.
And I think, what I gleaned a lot out of the article as well, and just even in some of my conversations across, is that it's the basics that oftentimes will protect you in these things. And I think in this scenario here is probably where we peeled back a lot of that Not all the way, but we made some exceptions. We've changed the way certain groups of individuals access the data, or we had less oversight into the governance of it because of the things we had to do. And it's the same thing. It's how many times do I go into my workshop and I grab a tool, I start working on it, put it down someplace, and then I get called to do something else, and then I come back and I'm like, where did I put that tool?
Right.
And it's so different. It just, we're so busy, and the pressure on IT, especially in healthcare, to continue to support the organization's desire to progress. Oftentimes, it's those little things that kind of fall by the wayside that you sometimes just assume are happening because they are so benign in nature. But oftentimes, those are the things that get you. Going back and looking at your access policies, making sure you have MFA to those critical systems. How many network segmentations were broke because all of a sudden now all of these users are now working from home? And I guess the other big piece is that how many users are still working from home or still working remote. So maybe just because it's been continued to work and you did not want to break that functionality to rebuild it the right way, maybe it's just still sitting there in maybe a bit more mature form, but is it really the right way to be doing what you're doing? And I think that's a lot of conversations where we have talked with customers about ways that we can help them do those things. But overall, it's not a bad practice to have these fire drills every once in a while to be able to revisit. It's not as easy given the pace of change that's going on in healthcare now. I do think these are great opportunities for every organization to just spend, and maybe it's a task force, maybe it's engaging with your project managers to kind of go through and do some general assessments. I'm sure that they do them on a regular basis, but it's never a bad thing when you're taking a step back and looking at everything that's transpired in the last 2 years to make sure that we're still taking care of the small stuff.
I mean, I think exercise, right? What happens when something bad like this happens? How do we react to it? What's our process? How do we go through the workflow to make sure that we are resilient or we can recover quickly or whatever the case may be? One of the things about Health ISAC, and obviously the 229 project too, is this concept of community, and that we're all stronger if we work together. And so the importance of those kinds of alliances and partnerships, those friendships, really like this whole fraternity, sorority, whatever we've got going on here, that you've got somebody that you can call and lean on and learn from and work with when times are rough. That's a really important part of this all too, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I can't count how many times that just when I was back on the provider side, that my New England neighbors of healthcare IT professionals, how many times we reached out, whether it was asking about a specific platform or talking with specific vendors, or this is what we're trying to do. Have you started that path as well? Maybe we can share notes and get some of that. It's a lot easier when you have peers that are looking at the same problems, and those relationships are truly important to continuing to build on what we're trying to build on.
Sort of making that transition now to the other article kind of feathers in together here nicely. This series of articles that Bill's written around VMware and the transition and the challenges around VMware and the price shock and all of that kind of goes with it. There's a lot of collaboration and conversation around this right now too. I know you hear a lot of it because you're in the field a ton and you spend a lot of time with healthcare organizations. What are you hearing, and what did you pluck out of that article that you thought was especially valuable?
What I personally feel on it, and I kind of brought up for multiple reasons. You mentioned VMware, and I think it's more pervasive than that. If you look across the industry, whether it's Cloud Software Group or VMware, and how private equity has kind of changed the conversation in regards to that. But it's more about that we have for so long, and it gets into like almost a community conversation where I've used this solution for so long it works, and then all of a sudden I tell you about it. And so we have this huge market share of technologies that are kind of have taken over, like almost they're part of the technology stack in healthcare. It's at that point where it makes me feel like we need to be more inclined to looking at newer technologies. And Bill kind of talks about some of the options there, but it's more about understanding that being too reliant on any platform that falls outside of the core clinical side of the house can put you in a situation like this. So whether it's the hypervisor layer, whether it's the virtualization layer, whether it's name your other network stack or security stacks, being able to bring in, and sometimes it's talent because we all work on shoestring budgets now. And those seem to be the market standards. And there's a lot of documentation. There's a lot of peers that are involved in that. It's kind of tough because I think we need something to kick it off. And maybe it's this moving down. But for years, it's always been that. You got that hypervisor layer, then you've got your virtualization layer that just becomes your stack. And there's never been any, I don't want to say experimentation with other platforms. How do we encourage that more within the healthcare ecosystem, whether it's engaging more with the core EHR providers to show other ways that you can deliver the same experience? It took something like this for all of us to say, well, maybe we need to start thinking about other ways and pressure on the EHR providers to help us down that path, because it's not always as simple as I'm going to take my team and go build out a KVM environment for this specific EHR workload because it's not on the certified platform. We need to start looking at more of in that lab environment. Is there some way that we can synergize our efforts together as a community to have these labs where we're testing out these newer technologies or these other vendors to make sure that we can build it out? But it's definitely challenging because it's one of those things that's been there. It works well.
You heard me saying the 2-minute drill all the time, but, stay a little paranoid. It's this idea, I think, of always looking at everything in the stack, even when it works well. It's like it's a place where we have anchored the ship and it's perfect. It works all the time, every time. It's really good. I'm going to build all my other strategies around the assumption that this thing is going to be my anchor point. But you got to go back and look at those anchor points pretty regularly and say, like, is that really where I should be anchored? Is there something new that's come along? Has there been a change? The problem part of this too is that it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when you get enough health systems that have decided that they're going to anchor to that point, then you wind up with second, third, fourth parties who start to say, oh, well, all of healthcare is anchored to that point, so we have to build to that anchor too. And it becomes really tough because then something like this happens with VMware and everyone has to sort of then question themselves, which causes all the third and fourth party organizations to question themselves, the EHR vendors and others, I think, to think about, like, was this really a good decision? It seemed like such a great decision. And that's really the whole point, I think, for me. This is really about you, but I'm on a run here, so I'm going to go with it. There's also this, we make really good decisions about where we're going to anchor and where we're going to focus and what technology we're going to buy. We make those decisions at a particular point in time with a particular set of data, and they're really good decisions at that point in time. But we can't fall in love with that decision and take it personally when the world changes and the technology changes and it's time to do something new. It's no slight against you. The world changed and the technology changed, and maybe it's time to unhook from that anchor and rehook to another place. It's hard, though, when everyone else is built around that same anchor. That's your point. And how do we ultimately get everyone to move? That can be a tough one.
Well, and I think it's more about there's a long history of not only success, but, support structures, like you said. And I think we've lived through a giant transition in how technology has enhanced over the last 30 years. And it's true, it's only happening faster. So I think we as a healthcare industry, especially healthcare IT industry, need to invest more time in understanding what those new technologies are. No, AI is the big piece now, and we're talking a lot about how that's going to impact clinical care. But even on the IT infrastructure side, I think we need to spend more time in these consortiums where, and maybe it's regional health systems out. In some ways they're competitive, but how can we come together, spend resources so we each are investing some money, maybe we are investing some of our human resources to build out and expand and understand, are there better ways to do what we're doing? Because again, you're right, like go back 10, 15 years ago, when you made that decision, more than likely it was probably backed by data and your peers were looking at the same stuff and you had.
And it was a cutting edge decision. You were on the bleeding edge of like, hey, we were the first. When I was at Seattle Children's, we went down this road. We were one of the first healthcare organizations of the country to virtualize and go to zero clients. And it was a great decision. Any of these decisions should not be made so as to put you in a position where this is my permanent decision, right? All of this stuff is up for debate. This wasn't one of your articles, and you don't know about this. I'm kind of springing it on you, but there was an open letter from Patrick Oppett, who's the Chief Information Security Officer at JP Morgan Chase, and he talks about software as a service and the risk of software as a service to the supply chain. It's kind of the same idea. Like, we used to buy these things and run them in our data center, and we had a lot of security protocols built to stay secure with identity and exchange of data and all those kinds of things because of that. And what happened, a lot of it happened during COVID. We went to software as a service. And so the vendors sort of changed the model to say, you're going to pay a monthly fee and we're going to deal this up to you. And it's going to come through a browser and all of that. But it created a whole new kind of supply chain risk, second, third, fourth party data being exchanged that you don't know anything about, but you're still responsible for it. It's all tied to that same idea of just like, you make really good decisions at the time, but you don't necessarily know all the implications.
And I think it's one of those catch-22s where you have to be nimble all the time, but you still have to be resilient and you still have to have the ability to support those scenarios when you bring them in place. So I think that's kind of where we are now. It's like, are there other technologies out there that can help support these features that you're getting from a vendor? Yeah, absolutely. Do I have the skill set to be able to deliver those in a time that meets my requirements? Maybe, maybe not. And then you also have, again, you mentioned those third, fourth, fifth connections into that environment that you have now built. So I think for me, it's about, again, taking a step back and doing a deep dive into your architecture in general. And I hate to say, like, you need to almost have that. Is there such thing as a 5-year plan anymore? But you almost need to recreate your 3-year plan every 2 years and start being more nimble as you're making decisions. It's not as easy. And I think there are easier industries to do that in than healthcare because of what we're dealing with and the lives we have at stake. And I think all the other part is, and just we are all carrying around a lot of legacy debt.
A lot of legacy, a lot of tech debt.
There's a lot of that to be considered as well. But I think the more we come together and we start examining these problems, whether it's Health ISAC or 229 or as a community at large, I think there will be opportunities for us to come together and find different solutions. Again, it's just another bump in the road as far as healthcare IT is concerned. Just how do we maneuver past this and make sure that we're not tying our entire stack to a certain pillar? Because again, it's one of those pillars of their infrastructure.
It's one of those things I used to talk to my team about all the time. This isn't actually Latin, but I used to tell the team semper gumby all the time, right? Always flexible. Build a program that can bend and flex and change. And you talked about being nimble or agile or whatever the case may be. That's the best version of the program, one that can change quickly. If you can do that, you're probably in the best position.
And I think there are a lot of technologies that have recently emerged and that are starting to get some traction in healthcare that will help organizations, but there's so many different aspects besides just the technology in general. Technology is usually the least of the problems.
Like, the technology is usually the easy part in the grand scheme of things.
Easier.
I really appreciate you being on the show today. Any last words, any other interesting stuff that's happening that you want to tell folks about?
What I would say is that I'm on the road probably 3 weeks out of the month on a regular basis. But these conversations are being had by all your peers. And I think it's great to be part of them. I think what we're seeing now is kind of this dynamic shift in looking at the technology ecosystem across a lot of healthcare providers across the US and globally about how they want to make that transition to the new phases of what not only the EHR providers are doing, but you get into a lot of the PACS solutions where they're moving to cloud versions and backside rendering. And I see a big push from CIOs all the way down through the engineering teams about understanding what's out there now. So I think what we're seeing kind of this, and maybe it took kind of the Broadcom and cloud software groups to kind of spur that at a larger scale. But a lot of our conversations now are really about, let's reimagine where we're going to be. Let's find that North Star and work out how we can navigate there. It's not going to be a one-step process, but they're putting a lot of effort into understanding the things they need to do and the people they need to bring in and the technologies that they need to evaluate as part of that process. So it's a very interesting time because I think we're going to see a lot of dynamic change in the next year or two, which is going to kind of redefine how health systems are interacting with these technologies moving forward.
Thanks again for being on UnHack the News. Always good to see you, Christian from Island. Hopefully I'll catch you on the road sometime soon.
Hopefully very soon, Drex. Good to see you.
Thanks for tuning in to UnHack the News. And while this show keeps you updated on the biggest stories, we also try to provide some context and even opinions on the latest developments. And now there's another way for you to stay ahead. Subscribe to our daily insights email. What you'll get is expertly curated health IT news straight to your inbox, ensuring you never miss a beat. Sign up at thisweekhealth.com/news. I'm your host, Drex DeFord. Thanks for spending some time with me today. And that's it for UnHack the News. As always, stay a little paranoid, and I'll see you around campus.